morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now I'm sorry, but we have to talk about 50 Shades of Grey again because there has been a major casting announcement. Yes, it looks like Universal and Focus have found their new Christian Grey after Charlie Hunnam so suddenly and publicly dropped out of the film. Who is it? It's Irish model-turned-actor Jamie Dornan. Who? My thoughts exactly. Everyone's thoughts exactly. But luckily, as a model, he starred in a number of underwear and fragrance commercials, so there's already a lot of 50 Shades of Grey-esque footage of him floating around, getting a lot of viewership today. But he does have some acting credibility. Sofia Coppola gave him his first acting role for Marie Antoinette, and he plays the sheriff on Once Upon a Time on ABC, which of course has a strong fan base. It's not small, but it's not big either, but at least he's bringing something with him to the table. Now, I don't watch Once Upon a Time out of solidarity for Fables, thank you very much, but from what I hear, he was quite the heartthrob on the show. I don't know if he's on it anymore, I think he's not. Spoiler, if you're ever planning to watch Once Upon a Time, I apologize, but he was liked on that show, and you know, people thought he was pretty good. So he's going to star here, but I have to say that with this casting announcement, while I do feel he looks more like Christian Grey from what I gather from what the fans said when Charlie Hunnam was cast, I feel that the movie's a little bit dead in the water at this point, unless it has an amazing trailer and or amazing reviews from critics. Why do I think that? Two reasons. First of all, I think that the narrative that Charlie Hunnam and his team created for why he left, true or not, was the first black eye for this film. First big black eye. Because Charlie Hunnam didn't say, oh, I got nervous about all the nudity and the sex scenes, because look what it's doing for the stars of Blue is the Warmest Color. That movie was rated NC-17, I believe banned in Idaho from what I've heard, for its very, very lengthy depictions of lesbian sex, and those actresses couldn't be hotter in Hollywood right now. So I don't think that Charlie Hunnam would quit for the sex scenes, especially because of his background with queer as folk. So he said the reason he quit 50 Shades of Grey is because he had major problems with the script, and that he'd asked for someone else to be brought in to do rewrites, and he had his own notes, and Universal was like, no, it's good the way it is, just take your pants off, and he jumped. So I think that was a huge problem for the film because it was a creative difference, not a prudish difference. And I think the second problem is that Jamie Dornan, hot or not, just isn't a good enough actor to bring in a lot of cachet to the film. And I think when you pair him with Dakota Johnson, really only famous for being the daughter of Melanie Griffith and Don Johnson, who has not gotten any, neither actor has any artistic credibility. They would have been much better off going to Juilliard and said, who wants an instant front of the line pass to Hollywood stardom? And at least had, that school's credentials to back these actors up. But I think right now it looks like, not porn that is parading itself as porn. So I think it's in a weird middle ground. So as I said, it needs either an amazing trailer and or great reviews at this point, because I just don't think it seems movie worthy. It doesn't seem legitimate. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day is that there's more negotiation problems going on over at Warner Brothers and HBO for the Entourage movie, which they hope is going to be like the Sex and the City movies. Now, the big problem, the holdup that came to light recently is that Jeremy Piven made his deal a while ago for the movie, and it's a very nice deal because he was, I think, most people would argue, the star of the show of Entourage is Ari Gold. However, all the other actors found out what his deal was and are holding out. They feel they should get a similar deal. And this is playing out, apparently, a Hollywood Reporter has said this is playing out in the tabloids with Mark Wahlberg telling TMZ that there's no Entourage movie because everyone's so greedy. And then Adrian Grenier, countering that with an Instagram that he, with some little speech about how everyone should have an equal chance to benefit off of the film. Well, Adrian Grenier, if you were in the film and Jeremy Piven wasn't, how many people do you think would see it? And if they were to make an Ari Gold film that you didn't appear in, do you think anybody would go? I think these are the questions that, Adrian Grenier's team needs to ask themselves and point out to him and the rest of the crew. I think you can't have a movie without Jeremy Piven, and I think there is, and I think that, you can't have a movie only with the other cast members. And I think, it's a sad fact about who's worth what. Now, of course, famously, the Friends cast back in the day all stuck together because Lisa Kudrow banded them together and said, banded them together and said, if we all hold out, we'll all get the raise, which was very smart of her because I feel Lisa Kudrow was the weakest member of that cast. So, so that worked. But Jeremy Piven isn't going to, band with everybody else. It's like Kim Cattrall, what she did with the Sex and the City movies. She didn't say, oh, everybody should get a great salary. She said, no, just me. And she got it. And the movies did quite well. Now, do I think an Entourage movie would be as successful as a Sex and the City movie? I think highly unlikely. I don't think it was ever the cultural phenomenon that Sex and the City was. And I think that, the Sex and the City movies spoke to the female movie-going audience and catered to them when they rarely are. But I think there are tons of movies for the Entourage audience, and there's really no reason to go and see it, unless they came up with some amazing story and got maybe a lot of, famous guest stars. Then maybe I could see it working. But Warner Brothers wants to keep the budget down to $30 million, so they can't afford to pay everybody what they're paying Piven apparently. So I feel that Adrian Grenier isn't doing anything else. He has nothing on the horizon, and it would really benefit him to get this movie out there. And I think he should just take whatever deal he can get in the hopes that it furthers his career and he can live to act another day. Because right now, I think he's dead in the water too, floating right next to 50 Shades of Grey. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Oh, it's a really tumultuous day in Hollywood. The third is that Monuments Men has been pushed to 2014. Yet another film playing chicken with the Oscar race and bowing out. Now, that's not what's happening, says George Clooney, because the news was released that the movie was being postponed. It's going to apparently come out in February 2014. Apparently the Wrap gave this big story about how it was a problem, the tone wasn't good, and the movie needed to be fixed. And George Clooney saw that article, was furious, and went to the Wrap's competitor, Deadline, which is managed by PMC Studios, and they said, oh, hey, guess what? George Clooney said, guess what? That's not the case. I just came from a test screening in the middle of the country, where I think he said Arizona, where Monuments Men tested through the roof. But guess what? It's just not going to be ready in time, so that's why we're pushing it. December's too crowded anyway. I think this is going to do really great in February because that's when Shutter Island was pushed back to, and that was a big hit. Shutter Island was a hit, financially at least. I had serious problems with the movie. I called the twist like 10 minutes in. But anyway, I feel that George Clooney is telling some half-truths here, because nobody dates a movie for a December 18th release date unless they feel it is somewhat of an Oscar contender, because it's just too crowded otherwise. Even The Hobbit, even though the first Hobbit didn't do particularly well at the awards season, the Lord of the Rings films did, so that's why they're in play there. So you're seeing all your blockbusters coming out for Thanksgiving, and then December is your Oscar race. So I don't believe for a second that they never thought of Monuments Men as a contender with that release date. Now, they might have screened the film, and then when they saw what it was becoming said, hey, guess what? It isn't an awards contender. Let's get the heck out of Dodge because we're going to die here. So that makes sense to me. And also, Clooney did admit that because he's shooting Tomorrowland for Brad Bird, he doesn't have time to promote Monuments Men appropriately. Now, if I were the studio distributing Monuments Men, I'd be like, wow, thanks for thinking of that in advance. Now I have to push my movie. But I guess being in a Brad Bird movie is pretty sweet. So that's a problem. And then Clooney also said the special effects isn't ready and the score is not ready. So he wouldn't, and he even said, oh, they have such faith in this movie that they wanted to push Monuments Men up to November to come out, but we're just not ready. So I don't know. I hope it's a good movie. It seems very much like World War II Ocean's 11 to me. But I liked the first Ocean's 11 quite a bit, so I would be game for that. I wish that the trailer was showing more of the supporting cast. Right now it's just the Damon-Clooney dynamic, which, while very appealing, I think we've seen before. But very interesting politics going on there, and all these movies have to shuffle. And this is a problem with calling release dates so early. Sometimes you legitimately aren't ready. And whenever you aren't ready or you move your date, everyone starts to speculate as to what the reason is. However, while I would love for studios not to call release dates so early, once one starts doing it, the rest of them have to do it. So it really, it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Who cares? We have chickens. All right. So those are the three stories for the day. The viewer question comes from Prince Pyro, and he or she says, so I'm going to attempt a viewer question. Congrats, you succeeded. Grace, as a black man, it's a man. Grace is a black man who loves movies more than maybe most people should. I'm right there with you. I get very frustrated with the films that black actors, producers, directors are involved in. I know there have been attempts to diversify, but most of these attempts still come from white producers and creators. So my question is, why do black creators seem to not attempt films other than what is considered quote-unquote African-American entertainment? All it does is separate audiences. Yes, I think that's true. I think that's a shame. I wish that, by the way, on that note, that white audiences were more willing to go to, quote-unquote African American films. I'm excited for Kevin Hart's Ride Along. I saw Medea Goes to Jail in the theater. I remember it very distinctly because me and my parents and I were the only white people in the entire theater. And I had a great time. It was a very good movie. And these are very good films. I also think, I think About Last Night, I think Kevin Hart's very funny. I think that movie looks very good to me. Also, Best Man Holiday looks pretty good. Oh, and I saw Meet the Peoples. So I'm doing my part. So I think other people should too, and realize that a lot of African American moviegoers see plenty of films that are full of only white people. So anyway, as to your question as to why the black talent is only making these kinds of movies. Well, those movies are doing quite well, and it never hurts to have a success on your resume. So I think that is a big reason. I think that Tyler Perry and Tim Story are leading the charge on that, and having great success. And a #1 movie is a #1 movie. However, in Hollywood, once you succeed in an area, Hollywood wants you to just keep doing that. So that's why it's like a double-edged sword. You want to get the hit on your resume, but then you have a very hard time, making something else. Now, I think that Antoine Fuqua, after Training Day, had a good shot at breaking free of this segregation, this segregation in Hollywood. But, however, I think, he made that Bruce Willis movie in the Congo, and that was not a hit. So I think Antoine Fuqua, while he was in a good position to do something, it didn't really work out for him. So that's a problem. I mean, you have to succeed. It's just like female directors. Because I have a similar problem. If female directors want to make, quote-unquote, regular movies, they need to make regular movies that succeed. Also, Spike Lee is trying to diversify. Inside Man was a diverse film with mostly white cast. I believe Clive Owen was the star of that, and Jodie Foster. And then also Old Boy coming out with Josh Brolin, his Old Boy American remake. That is not a quote-unquote African-American film. So great, kudos for him. I don't know how well Old Boy's going to do, and I'm sure most people will say just go see the original, but Spike Lee is trying. I think the real problem is just Hollywood. I think Hollywood really likes to typecast people both in front of and behind the camera. Hopefully that will change. I think you're seeing a huge renaissance, as people are saying, of African-American films with 12 Years a Slave, The Butler, Fruitvale Station, and all of those films. 42 is about Jackie Robinson, but has a white director. But and also Mandela. I'm not quite sure. I'm afraid off the top of my head about the talent behind the camera on that. But that's the other film. But the 3 films I mentioned, Fruitvale Station, 12 Years a Slave, and Lee Daniels' The Butler, are really notable because they're not only films about African Americans, but they're from African American directors, and they're all being very well received critically. And The Butler was successful at the box office, so I think, and had a lot of white characters in it. So I think have a very good crossover audience. So I think there's a chance for Lee Daniels. I'd be interested to see what he does next, and I'm also very interested to see what Steve McQueen does next. While he's going to get all this attention for 12 Years a Slave, his first 2 films had a white star. Hunger and Shame. So I think that hopefully after 12 Years a Slave he'll go back to that and make in a mainstream way, and then he'll be a major force for diversification. So I think it's very interesting what you're saying. I think it's definitely a problem. It's a problem for women, and I also think Latino filmmakers. Look at Robert Rodriguez. He makes really Latino-only films. So I hope that everyone diversifies, but for there to be diversity, there first must be success for Hollywood to feel it's worth to take the gamble. Because if they can't, trade off of your race and your cult following, they're going to trade off of your previous successes and put that in the trailer. So that's the way the business works. But I think we are making progress in every area. So hopefully this won't be a problem for too much longer or as big a problem. These problems never totally go away. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll check out these other videos right now.